The court said, and the defense may call its next witness.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Yes, Your Honor. In defense of Mr. Miles Gua, we call Paul Doran."
Witness sworn.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Good morning, Mr. Doran."
The court said, "Sir, if you would please state your name and spell it."
The witness said, "Yes. My name is Paul Doran. That's spelled D-O-R-A-N. Is that better? Shall I repeat that? Okay. It's D-O-R-A-N.
The court said, "So, sir, I'll need you to speak right into the microphone."
The witness said, "Okay. Paul Doran, called as a witness by the defendant, having been duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. By Ms. Shrofa."
Mr. Doran, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you do for a living.
I'm a corporate risk advisor or corporate risk manager.
And could you tell us, please, what does that mean in real life?
Essentially what I do is I advise corporations and high net worth individuals or sometimes NGOs or non-profit organizations in how to protect themselves from hostile activity. And that hostile activity could be from interference by foreign governments, or it could be terrorism, or it could be criminal activity.
Mr. Doran, how long have you been a corporate risk management professional?
I've been doing this for about 25 years.
And could you tell the jury, please, how did you get started doing this line of work?
So I have an advanced degree in intelligence and international relations from a university in the UK, which I obtained in the mid-90s. I then worked for a London-based international risk consulting business which advised companies and individuals on the kind of matters that I've just described. I then worked in public sector for the British government in foreign intelligence. After that, I held a series of increasingly senior security and intelligence roles within a number of multinational companies, including US companies, and most recently I have founded and I'm currently running my own consulting business.
Where's your consulting business located, Mr. Doran?
It's located in London.
Mr. Doran, you're going to have to let me finish the question.
I apologize.
And please, could you use that microphone because I'm a little hard of hearing?
The court said, "Yes, just bring that as close as possible to your mouth."
The witness said, "Okay."
All right. Where is your company located?
My company is based in London, UK.
And could you just very briefly tell us about your education?
So I have 2 degrees, a degree in modern languages, and an advanced degree in international relations and intelligence from the University of Salford in the UK.
Mr. Doran, the clients at your company, where do they draw from?
They could be US clients, they could be European, really global client base.
And is it fair to say that your clients are not just companies, but also NGOs?
Yes, that's correct.
And how about individuals? Do you help individuals?
I do.
Now tell us, please, in advising your clients. Do you assess the risk associated with different nations in this world?
Yes, I do.
And could you tell us, please, which countries you focus on and why?
So the list would include People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, Islamic Republic of Iran, the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, Venezuela, and Cuba.
And why did you pick these countries upon which to focus?
These countries generally act in international affairs in a way which is not generally respectful of international norms and laws and standards. They operate according to their own principles, and often that's in conflict with what we might call democratic norms that we enjoy in the United Kingdom or the United States.
What type of governments do all of these countries have in common?
The common thread which runs through all of those countries is that, to a greater or lesser extent, they are all run by one-party dictatorships, by totalitarian governments which do not allow democratic expression in those countries.
And how do these countries respond to exertion of influence from outside of their borders?
These countries are very sensitive to criticism or any kind of challenge that they may receive from disgruntled citizens within their own borders and also foreign critics or their citizens who may happen to live abroad.
Mr. Doran, do these factors matter in the work you do as a risk assessment manager?
Yes. They are absolutely of primary importance.
And could you tell the jury why that is?
For countries like the People's Republic of China, to take that as the example, A number of my clients have been critical of the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party. They've been advocating for freedom and democracy in China and human rights. Or they've been involved in disputes with Chinese government entities. And in that case, the Chinese government takes a very, very hostile view of that kind of challenge to its authority and its power. And they often use the levers of state power to victimize and target my clients.
What is the People's Republic of China's view towards dissent?
People's Republic of China absolutely will not tolerate dissent.
Mr. Doran, in your work, is the People's Republic of China one of the main focal countries?
It's perhaps the most focal country.
And could you tell the jury why?
Since 2012, since the ascent of Xi Jinping as President of China, or Dictator of China, China's external actions have become much more aggressive than they were previously. The Chinese government and the CCP regularly use its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, its police, and its intelligence agencies to intimidate and coerce Chinese dissidents overseas, including some who have been my client.
Mr. Doran, how much of your work involves protecting individuals and corporations from the hostilities of the People's Republic of China?
Mr. Finkel said, objection. Asked and answered.
I would judge about.
The court said, overruled.
I would judge about 50%, although that number is growing.
And could you just describe your experience as it relates to the security threats posed by the PRC?
Do you mean my personal experiences?
And professional.
Yeah. So I have lived and worked in China in a sensitive commercial position, and while I worked there, I was absolutely sure that all of my phone calls were listened to. I was sure that my emails were being read clandestinely, without my knowledge, permission. I know that agents of the Chinese government from time to time entered my apartment while I wasn't there. There were signs that they'd been intruding. And they also tried to recruit me as a spy for the Ministry of State Security.
Mr. Doran, does your experience also include training in the structure and operations of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the CCP?
Yes, it does.
And could you tell us, please, what is the correlation between the CCP and the PRC?
So the People's Republic of China is the name which the country of China has had since 1949, when the Communist Party emerged victorious in the Chinese Civil War. And they renamed the country the People's Republic of China on the basis that they are a Marxist, Leninist party, a communist party. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is the sole legal party in China. It dominates every aspect of political, economic, social, cultural life there. And it jealously guards its monopoly on power. You could say that the Chinese state is the CCP, and the CCP is the Chinese state.
Mr. Doran, does your experience include the methods in which the PRC government targets its critiques?
Yes.
And what does that matter? Why does this matter in your line of work?
It matters because my clients are often subject to very coercive or intimidatory tactics by Chinese government agencies. And knowing how they operate, I can advise my clients on how to take measures to reduce that risk or mitigate that risk.
Mr. Doran, do you have experience with something called Operation Fox Hunt?
I do.
Now, just at a very general level for now, what is Operation Fox Hunt?
Operation Fox Hunt is a global intelligence program directed from the top of the Chinese bureaucracy by President Xi and implemented by the Chinese police and intelligence agencies. Its purpose is to surveil, harass, coerce, persecute Chinese dissidents outside China to persuade them to renounce their activities, which may be pro-democracy, for example, or to return to China to face trial, or, if neither of those things are possible, to pressure them into committing suicide.
Mr. Doran, why does Operation Fox Hunt matter in your line of work?
Operation Fox Hunt matters in my line of work because I have a number of clients who have been targeted by Operation Fox Hunt activities. And my job has been to work with those clients to help them reduce the risk that they face and to enjoy some degree of security in their lives outside China.
Mr. Doran, have you been retained by Mr. Gua as an expert in this matter?
I've been retained by Mr. Guo's counsel.
And did Mr. Guo's counsel compensate you for your work here as an expert?
I am receiving professional fees.
And do you know by now how much money you've been paid for your expert work here?
I could give you an approximate figure in British pounds, which is around 15,000 British pounds.
And those 15,000 British pounds, do they go to you or to someone else?
They go to me. That's my fee.
And are your expenses included in this 15,000 pounds?
Yes.
Mr. Doran, are your expenses included in the 15,000?
You mean my hotel fare, hotel bill and, no, they're not included, no.
You want to correct your first answer?
Yes, I correct that, yes.
Okay. And does your testimony here depend on whether or not we pay your bill?
No, not at all.
Ms. Schrofa said, Your Honor, at this time we would like to have Mr. Doran qualified as an expert on the People's Republic of China, the CCP, and...
Mr. Finkel said, May I inquire on just two issues?
The court said you may.
Voir dire examination. By Mr. Finkel.
Sir, what is the PLA?
People's Liberation Army.
And that's the army for what government?
That's the Chinese military.
And so the PLA is under the control of the CCP, is that correct?
It's under the control of the Central Military Commission, which is controlled by the CCP.
And who sits at the head of the Central Military Commission?
Xi Jinping.
And so the PLA works for President Xi, is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, No objection.
The court said, he is so qualified.
Ms. Schrofa said, Thank you.
By Ms. Schrofa.
Okay, Mr. Doran, tell the jury, what is the People's Republic of China? Very briefly.
So the People's Republic of China is the term that's used to describe the country of China since 1949. Before that it was just called China, or the Republic of China. But when the Communist Party was victorious in the Chinese Civil War, it renamed the country the People's Republic of China.
And is the CCP the sole political power in the People's Republic of China?
Yes, it is.
And what does the CCP control?
So the CCP is a totalitarian organization. It directs all political life, it directs all economic life. It directs what citizens can see, what they can read, what they can believe, how they can assemble. It controls cultural life, so it acts as the censor for what's permissible art and what's not permissible art. So essentially it's a one-party state that governs China in an exclusive fashion.
Is it fair to say that one should use China, the People's Republic of China, and CCP interchangeably?
That's permissible.
Tell us, please, who is Xi Jinping?
Xi Jinping is, in my view, the dictator of China. Officially, he is the president of China and the Secretary General of the Chinese Communist Party.
All right. Well, I'm going to just show you the government. And the court what is marked as Defense Exhibit 60692. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
That's President Xi Jinping.
Ms. Schrofa said, the defense moves 60692 into evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, 401 objection.
The court said, it's admitted.
Defendant's Exhibit 60692 received in evidence.
Where do you recognize the gentleman from?
International media.
And who is he?
He is the President of China, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party.
Ms. Schrofa said, and is it published to the jury? Thank you. So I can have that taken down. And you can tell the jury, what is the Chinese Ministry of Public Security?
The Chinese Ministry of Public Security is the official government body which controls all police activity in China and internationally. It's divided into a number of different bureaux or different offices, and for example, the first bureau is what you would call the political police or the national security police. That bureau is essentially the Chinese Gestapo. It's the...
I'm going to stop you there just for a minute, Mr. Doran. And first I'm going to show you an exhibit, which is 60,691. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
Who is that?
That's Wang Xiaohong,
And what is his position?
He is the Minister of Public Security.
Ms. Shrofa said, Your Honor, the defense moves 60691 in evidence.
Voir dire examination. By Mr. Finkel.
Have you met this man in person?
No.
So you don't know if that's a fair and accurate photograph of him?
I do know.
You've never seen him in person?
No, but I recognize the photograph.
Have you seen him in person?
I haven't seen him in person.
Mr. Finkel said, Objection.
The court said, it is admitted. Go ahead.
Defendant's Exhibit 60691 received in evidence. By Ms. Shrofa.
All right. So tell the jury who this man is.
He is the Minister of Public Security.
And what is the Ministry of Public Security?
As I mentioned, the Ministry of Public Security is the Chinese government body or agency which controls all police and law enforcement activity in China and its law enforcement activities overseas. But it's also what you might call the secret police, the Chinese Gestapo, which its purpose is essentially to identify and eliminate threats to the Chinese Communist Party.
Is there an acronym for the Ministry of Public Security?
MPS.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. What is the Ministry of State Security?
So the Ministry of State Security is China's intelligence agency. I think as a useful analogy, the closest equivalent in the United States would be the Central Intelligence Agency.
And who is the head of the Ministry of State Security?
Head of the Ministry of State Security is Chen Isin.
And let me show you what is marked as Defense Exhibit 60689. Have you met this man in person?
Not in person.
Do you know who he is?
Yes, that's Chen Isin.
Is that an accurate photograph of the person?
I believe it to be.
Ms. Shrofa said, All right. So I would move 60689 into evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, No objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Defendant's Exhibit 60689 received in evidence.
Ms. Shrofa said, Does the jury have it?
By Ms. Shrofa.
Okay. Give me the guy's name one more time.
It's Chen Isin.
Thank you. Is the Ministry of State Security also referred to by an acronym?
Yes, it's commonly referred to as the MSS.
Ms. Shrofa said, All right. We can take that down. And you can tell the jury, what is 3PLA?
3PLA, or the Third Department of the General Staff of the People's Liberation Army, is, or was until relatively recently when there was a reorganization, the Intelligence Wing or the Intelligence Department of the Chinese military.
And what is it responsible for?
So it's responsible, amongst other things, for cyber warfare, cyber espionage, and cyber subversion.
And what is cyber warfare, cyber espionage, and cyber submersion?
Subversion. So these are three terms of art, which I'll explain very briefly, if I may. Cyber warfare would be hostile activity in cyberspace against an enemy. So it would be things like sabotaging a nuclear power station through cyber activity or breaking controls on a dam to release water through hostile cyber activity. Cyber espionage uses much of the same tools and techniques, but its purpose is to gain information. Confidential information which is held on computer systems. And cyber subversion is the use of the internet and social media to sow disinformation and to create false or fake news stories with the purpose of advancing China's national security objectives.
Mr. Doran, could you tell the jury, what is the Information Support Force?
So the Information Support Force, which is recently created, is the body of the Chinese military which actually carries out those activities that I've just mentioned.
And what was it called before April of 2024?
Before April 2024, it was called the Strategic Support Force.
And who is the current head of Information Support Force?
Is Lieutenant General Bai Yi.
And let me show you Defense Exhibit 60688. Who is that?
That's Lieutenant General Bai Yi.
Ms. Shrofa said, and I move Defense Exhibit 60688 into evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, No objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Defendant's Exhibit 60688 Received in evidence.
Mr. Doran, have you had any interactions with either the MPS or the MSS?
Yes, I've had interactions with both.
Mr. Finkel said, objection to relevance.
The court said, overruled.
Could you tell the jury what your interactions have been?
When I lived in China, as a foreign national and a national of a country, the United Kingdom, which China considers to be hostile or potentially hostile, I was subject to routine surveillance by Chinese intelligence agents. That included routine intercept of my telephone conversations and intercept of my emails and things like my internet browsing history. For example, I also know that Chinese agents, without my permission, entered my apartment and searched it several times. The MS, that was the MPS, in my view. And then the MSS, knowing my background as a former employee of the British government, approached me on 2 occasions to try to persuade me or coerce me into spying on their behalf.
Mr. Doran, if you were spying on their behalf, you wouldn't tell us today, correct?
If I were spying on their behalf, I'd probably be in prison by now.
Okay. Now, Mr. Doran, does the PRC hold elections?
Yes, but they are sham elections.
And what do you mean by sham elections?
So no candidate other than a candidate from the Chinese Communist Party or a bogus sham party created by the Communists will ever be elected to the National People's Congress in China.
And why is that?
Because the Chinese Communist Party believes it has a unique and sole right to govern China. And it cannot tolerate and will not tolerate any other political parties.
What is the fundamental mission of the CCP?
The fundamental mission of the CCP is to maintain itself in power.
For how long?
Indefinitely.
What is the CCP's views on free speech?
The CCP does not tolerate free speech.
Are the citizens of the People's Republic of China allowed to criticize the CCP?
They're not allowed to criticize the CCP.
Are they allowed to advocate political positions?
They can only advocate political positions which are consistent with the views of the CCP.
And what if they are opposite to the views of the CCP?
Then they would be treated as criminals.
What is the CCP's view of the Chinese citizen who supports democracy or free speech?
That they are a criminal and a traitor.
Are they also considered to be enemies of the state itself?
Yes, that's a good term to use.
Mr. Doran, what happens to the Chinese citizen who supports democracy?
A lot of different things can happen to them, but typically they would be thrown in prison after a show trial, or they could be disappeared into a black prison system, which is essentially being held incommunicado for an indefinite period of time.
Does it matter to the CCP from where those Chinese citizens support democracy and free speech? What countries they're located in?
It doesn't matter. The Chinese Communist Party demands the loyalty of every Chinese person. Every Chinese citizen, whether they're resident in the PRC or whether they reside abroad.
Mr. Doran, what does it mean when someone says it crosses Chinese Communist Party red lines?
So that would mean, let me take a step back. There are certain things and certain activities which the Chinese Communist Party cannot tolerate. And they would be their red lines, so that would be advocating for freedom of speech, advocating for representative democracy, advocating for religious freedom, advocating for the freedom of certain nationalities within China. Anything which goes against the official orthodoxy of the Chinese Communist Party.
Ms. Shrofa said, please may we have DX Stip 001 pulled up for everyone. And if I could just have the first paragraph highlighted. And Mr. Doran, I'm going to ask you, please, to read the first paragraph that starts with, IT is hereby. Right above the numbered paragraph.
IT is hereby stipulated and agreed by the United States of America and Miles Guay, the defendant, through their attorneys of record that.
And if you could read paragraph 1.
The FBI has investigated individuals who, working at the direction of the government of the People's Republic of China,
The PRC government have engaged in an international campaign known as Operation Fox Hunt to coerce individuals located in the United States and elsewhere to return to China to face charges brought by the PRC government or to otherwise reach financial settlements with the PRC government.
Mr. Doran, could you tell the jury, what is Operation Fox Hunt?
Mr. Finkel said, asked and answered.
The court said, sustained.
Could you tell us the aspects of Operation Fox Hunt and what it entails?
Mr. Finkel said, asked and answered. This was all covered.
The court said, sustained.
What is a dirty tricks campaign run by Operation Fox Hunt?
Mr. Finkel said, same objection.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Doran, are there specific or particular Chinese government agencies that conduct Operation Fox Hunt?
Yes, there are.
And could you tell the jury which government agencies those are?
So that would be the Ministry of Public Security as the lead agency, supported by the Ministry of State Security and by elements of the Chinese military.
Now, earlier I showed you DX60691. Ms. Schrofa said, if we could just pull that up again. And what is this gentleman's role in the processes or the work of the Operation Fox Hunt?
So Wang Xiaohong, as the Minister of Public Security, received instruction and receives instructions from President Xi to conduct Operation Fox Hunt.
And what relationship, if any, does he have to the direct workings of Operation Fox Hunt?
So as the head of the ministry, he has overall operational control of Operation Fox Hunt.
And what do you mean when you say operational control?
So he would direct resources, he would discuss targets, he would allocate priorities in terms of targets. And then he would delegate that operational work to his subordinates.
Mr. Doran, generally speaking, how large is the Operation Fox Hunt apparatus in the People's Republic of China?
Well, bearing in mind that as a totalitarian state, it's very opaque. But my professional judgment would be Operation Fox Hunt involves thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Chinese agents from either the MPS, the MSS, and other agencies, and it probably, in my view, has an unlimited budget.
Does it also include Chinese prosecutors and operatives?
Yes. So the Chinese procurator, which is the equivalent of the national prosecutor, who draw charges against the targets of Operation Fox Hunt. But you'd have to understand that for many of those charges, they're really bogus. They're charges which are laid in an exaggerated or false way, because the objective is to clamp down on dissent rather than to actually apprehend criminals.
Mr. Doran, in terms of intended targets, how wide or how large is the pool or the reach of Operation Fox Hunt?
Targets, probably thousands, if not tens of thousands.
And how does the CCP identify them, their targets?
So they have a very sophisticated global intelligence program, a monitoring program, that looks out for dissidents or activists around the world, particularly those who use social media or broadcast media, academics, for example, or people who can access mainstream media, and they look for people who have advocated for democracy and freedom in China. And they especially look for people who have exposed corruption at the senior levels of the Chinese Communist Party.
The court said, all righty. It's now 11:29 and so we will take our half-hour break. Remember, do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. Don't read, watch, or listen to anything from any source that touches upon the subject matter of this case.
Jury not present.
The court said, sir, you may step out of the courtroom.
Witness not present. Continued on next page.
The court said, please be seated. Is there anything before we resume at noon?
Mr. Finkel said, just two brief things, Your Honor. 1. I understand that Mr. Doran was in the courtroom during a large part, about an hour or so, of Mr. Yi's testimony. I would just ask that the defense not have their witnesses wait in the courtroom. I don't think that's appropriate. And second, I counted 3 references to the Gestapo, and references to black sites and rendition and suicide, all of which I think are a bit far afield of what the court has permitted with respect to this particular witness. I didn't object because I didn't want to draw attention to it, but I think it's inappropriate for those sort of really overly prejudicial statements to be coming from, in particular, an expert witness in the context of this trial, given what the defense is attempting to use this witness for. So I just asked that that not continue, asked that Ms. Schroff not go down those lines, and, if necessary, that you instruct the witness not to use such terminology.
Mr. Kumraju said, in terms of the first issue, Your Honor, we have not had any fact witnesses sit in the courtroom. It's obviously appropriate for an expert witness to observe testimony if it's relevant to their particular expert opinions or their testimony. So that's why Mr. Doran was here for Mr. Yi's testimony. But we have not and will not have any fact witnesses sitting in the courtroom during any trial testimony.
The court said, and with regard to the second aspect?
Mr. Kumraju said, I'll let Ms. Schroff, it's Ms. Schroff's witness. I'll let her answer.
Ms. Schrofa said, I wasn't planning to follow up on it. He said what he said. I'm not planning to follow up on whether or not, half of China has committed suicide or anything like that. But what he said is what he said. I'm not planning to follow up. I actually didn't. We're just less scripted. So I don't quite know where he's going half the time, so I'm not going to follow up. I'm not being articulate. But I'm not going to go down the suicide road, if that's the government's concern. Record.
The court said, so is there an application, Mr. Finkel?
Mr. Finkel said, we asked that that be stricken from the.
Ms. Schrofa said, no. We would oppose that because that is what the CCP does. They drive people to suicide.
Mr. Finkel said, so.
Ms. Schrofa said, that is part and parcel of his testimony. It wasn't any information that we specifically geared him toward. That is what the expert says, and it should stand.
Mr. Finkel said, it's the term Gestapo, which is a Nazi term. And just to be clear, Your Honor, we don't vouch for anything the CCP does. We're trying to just maintain the integrity of this trial. We're assistant United States attorneys enforcing U.S. law. And for a witness to say that the Gestapo is out to get Miles Guo is just not appropriate, given the issues that are before the court.
The court said, my understanding is that it is his opinion that they use Gestapo-like tactics, and Ms. Schroff says she's not going to pursue the Gestapo theme, or the suicide theme.
Ms. Schrofa said, I'm not going to mention the word Gestapo, suicide, or any such word again. And you know what? If the CCP employs Gestapo-like tactics, I think the Department of Justice may want that to stop. So it's good that it's out there.
Mr. Finkel said, that's why the Department of Justice has investigated and prosecuted these crimes, as has been stipulated to, and Ms. Schroff, I think, knows that very well.
Ms. Schrofa said, and that's why we will bring that out, but I'm not going to touch Gestapo or suicide again.
The court said, so I'm not going to strike his references to the Gestapo, the suicide, and the rendition. Anything further?
Mr. Finkel said, just briefly, Your Honor. I assume Mr. Doran is not going to offer an opinion about the veracity of Mr. Yi's testimony. The defense said they weren't going to do that, but they had him sit in the courtroom. So I just want to make sure that's not going to happen.
Mr. Kumraju said, no. Mr. Doran is not going to offer any opinion on Mr. Yi's credibility or the truth of his testimony.
Mr. Finkel said, that seems like a bit of a very specific answer.
The court said, he's not going to be vouching for him, is that correct?
Mr. Kumraju said, that's absolutely right.
Mr. Finkel said, is he going to comment about his testimony?
Mr. Kumraju said, no. He's an expert viewing testimony about a CCP operation. He's not going to say anything about Mr. Yi did this or Mr. Yi's right or Mr. Yi's wrong. Experts sit in trials all the time to view testimony. But he is not, Your Honor, going to opine in any way on the credibility of Mr. Yi's testimony.
Mr. Finkel said, so, Your Honor, I think this is an issue. What is he going to say about Mr. Yi's testimony?
Mr. Kumraju said, nothing. Nothing.
The court said, he's not going to be commenting on Mr. E. correct?
Mr. Kumraju said, yeah, he's not going to use Mr. Yi's name once.
The court said, okay. Anything further?
Mr. Finkel said, no. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Not from us, Your Honor."
Ms. Shrofa said, "Nothing further."
The court said, "All righty."
Recess. Afternoon session 12 p.m. Trial resumed. Jury not present.
The court said, "Please have the jurors brought in."
The law clerk said, "Jury entering."
Jury present.
The court said, "Please be seated. And please remember, sir, you're still under oath."
By Ms. Shrofa.
What is the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region?
So the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region is the former British colony of Hong Kong. It's a territory in southwest China. It was handed back to the People's Republic of China in 1997 under an international treaty between the United Kingdom and the PRC. And under the terms of that treaty, a certain way of life was supposed to be maintained in Hong Kong under something called One Country, Two Systems. And that meant that residents in Hong Kong could enjoy a greater degree of personal freedom. They could express political views that were not allowed in the PRC. And they could expect a fair and transparent justice system in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, over the last 3 to 4 years, perhaps longer than that, those freedoms have been eroded because the PRC government has broken its treaty obligations to the United Kingdom. And now, unfortunately, Hong Kong is no longer an oasis of democracy and freedom in China, but simply another part of China.
Mr. Doran, are threats to the family and people who are dissidents a common practice by the CCP?
Very common.
Is denial of education, work, or shelter also a common practice of the CCP?
Yes, it is.
How about spamouflage? What is that concept?
Spamouflage is a term that means the use of online and social media outlets. Perhaps also broadcast or print media, YouTube, for example, to spread false or exaggerated and certainly defamatory information about a target. It is designed to denigrate the target, to ruin their reputation, to cast doubt on their ethics and integrity, to make them out to be bad people generally.
Mr. Doran, is it a common practice to seize and freeze assets so as to keep dissidents from speaking out?
Yes, it is. Assets and bank accounts in China are often frozen. And it sometimes has the unintended consequence of bank accounts in other countries being frozen as well.
Is the CCP likely to freeze a bank account or assets outside of the People's Republic of China if it knows of a dissident who is speaking out?
Mr. Finkel said, "Objection to the leading and calls for speculation."
The court said, "You may answer."
Yes. If I may just take a moment to describe how that process would work.
Mr. Finkel said, "Object to this description."
The court said, "You may answer."
Thank you. The process would be that a bank account in China or perhaps in Hong Kong would be frozen for the dissident who lives outside China and is seeking a banking relationship here in the United States. For example, they may then subsequently find it difficult to open a bank account here or maintain a bank account because the compliance officers at the US bank would look at that freeze and say, "Okay, this guy or this person is a risk. We don't want them to be our client." Unfortunately, that often means that they don't do deep research into why those assets are being frozen. It's just much easier for the bank sometimes to dismiss account holders as a high risk without really knowing what the context of that freeze may have been.
Mr. Doran, does the CCP pressure host countries to return individuals to the People's Republic of China?
Yes, it does very much so.
How?
So it uses a number of diplomatic levers and other tools to pressure countries. So, for example, if I can give the example of countries like Cambodia or Thailand, there are others. Chinese government would threaten to withhold loans, for example. Or it might imply that bilateral relations would suffer if that country did not cooperate in returning dissidents to China.
What about vis-a-vis the United States or the United Kingdom?
So it's a bit more challenging for the Chinese authorities to do that because the US and the UK are less susceptible to that kind of diplomatic blackmail. But nevertheless, The Chinese authorities would threaten those countries with sanctions in an overt sense, and clandestinely or covertly they may conduct online cyber espionage or cyber subversion against those countries or individuals in those countries to pressure them to agree to Chinese demands.
What about the tactic of bringing false criminal accusations?
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, can we have a brief sidebar?
The court said yes.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, there's obviously a tension in the question about false accusations. And to the extent Ms. Schroff is inquiring about a false accusation of Chinese law, I think that would be in the scope of Your Honor's ruling as appropriate inquiry. The danger, and it's an ongoing danger from the government's perspective, is the implication subtly that this trial is a false accusation that's been influenced by the CCP. And in fact, the way this question came to be was about pressuring other countries, pressuring the US and UK. Mr. Doran said that the US and UK are not as susceptible, but can be susceptible to. I think he said sanctions or something like that are threatened. Immediately following that question, are there also false accusations of criminal conduct? And this is approaching, I think if not over the line, of what Your Honor ruled yesterday that they can't imply, and having said many times they won't imply, because it is not true that this case is in any way, pressure or brought upon by the Chinese Communist Party, because that's not true.
The court said, I'd like you just to clarify your question and then just insert Chinese law.
Ms. Schroff said, That's fine, Your Honor. But the question on those factors is a different question than this one. There has in fact been pressure on those countries. The government knows. The prosecutor.
The court said, I understand that. I'm just saying for this particular question.
Ms. Schroff said, I'm happy to.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, this is a rare time I'm going to say something. Ms. Schroff is right. There has been pressure. It's stipulated to in part in our stipulation, but there's a difference between what's in the stipulation, what the parties have agreed to, what Your Honor has ruled, and using pressure to suggest that this is part of that pressure campaign, because it's not.
The court said, I really don't believe that they have gotten there. I know that it's a sensitive issue, but...
Ms. Schroff said, I'm not trying to go there honestly.
Mr. Kamaraju said, and I will commit again, we have no intention of making that argument at summation. I can commit to that since I'm the one doing it.
The court said, I completely never expected it. It's not something that we have to worry.
Mr. Finkel said, I certainly understand, Your Honor. We appreciate that promise. But still we're very concerned for obvious reasons trying to protect our case, that there's even just subtle implications to allow the jury to draw an inference. And that's what we're trying to police against.
Ms. Schroff said, Tell me what is the next question you want me to ask?
Mr. Finkel said, Next is no further questions.
The court said, I just ask you not to address him. Address me.
Ms. Schroff said, Your Honor, tell me, please, if I may, how would you like me to clean that up? Were the false accusations, I just want to reword it correctly. The false criminal accusations were brought in China or under China law.
Mr. Finkel said, False accusations were under China law.
Mr. Kamaraju said, May I suggest this? I think he said yes, there are false accusations. Could Ms. Schroff just ask? When you just testified about false accusations, were you referring to false accusations by the Chinese government?
The court said, false accusations about violations of Chinese law.
Mr. Finkel said, I think at this point we could just move on. The government has made its point. I understand Ms. Schroff is not going any further, and we can just move on.
The court said, no need to ask anything further.
Ms. Schroff said, okay.
Continued on next page. In open court, jury present.
The court said, you may continue.
By Ms. Schroff.
Has the CCP also been known to abuse Interpol red notices?
Yes, it frequently does so.
How about the use of surveillance and hacking of the target or the target's family and colleagues?
Yes, that's a common tactic.
And how is that put into play?
So do you refer to hacking?
You can start with either surveillance or hacking.
So that would include the deployment of undercover Chinese agents who would conduct surveillance of the target. The target being the dissident, that would include physical surveillance. It might also include telephone intercept. Illegal telephone intercept if it's carried out outside China without the knowledge or permission of the host government. It might also include illegal or improper access to email through the use of spyware which would be unintentionally uploaded to the target devices, for example.
How about the use of physical intimidation and beatings?
Yes, that has occurred as well.
What about kidnapping or other such acts?
Kidnap has certainly been used as a tactic in Operation Fox Hunt.
What about the filing of false lawsuits? Could you tell the jury how Fox Hunt employs that tactic?
So one aspect of Fox Hunt, and this is related to Interpol red notices as well, is that the victim may be accused of crimes in China, which are either false accusations or grossly exaggerated accusations related to something relatively trivial or minor. They then issue a Interpol red notice, which you'll understand is an international document designed to enable cooperation between police forces. So if a subject of a red notice is a resident in the United States, there is by the Interpol guidelines and regulations an obligation on the United States to arrest that person. But my view is that the Chinese government, the CCP, routinely abuses that system.
In your expert opinion, Mr. Doran, are there actual legitimate red notices issued by the CCP?
Yes.
And how does the CCP choose its targets for Operation Fox Hunt?
It chooses its targets based on the perceived threat to the legitimacy, prestige, and monopoly on power of the Chinese Communist Party.
And who is included within that target group?
So included in that target group would be a range of people. But it would typically include people who advocate for democracy in China, advocate for the overthrow of the Chinese Communist Party, make criticism of individual senior members of the Chinese Communist Party, people who advocate for freedom for religious minority, for example.
How about people who either mock or just make fun of the CCP leaders?
Yes, that's also the case. A good example of that was recently in Cambodia, where a young man who made derogatory cartoons portraying President Xi as a teddy bear, as a panda bear, he was added to the Fox Hunt list.
How about individuals with large social media followings?
In my professional view, individuals with large social media followings are particularly sensitive targets for the Chinese authorities in Operation Fox Hunt because they have influence amongst the Chinese expatriate or diasporate community. They have a platform on which to share their views and advocate for their views. So they're not just acting in isolation. They're advocating to a large constituency of people.
Mr. Doran, does the CCP employ these tactics against its critics both inside and outside of the People's Republic of China?
Yes, it does.
And could you give us some examples of how it has done so outside the People's Republic of China?
So here in the United States, I think it's a matter of record that undeclared MSS agents have traveled to the United States with the intention of pressuring individuals, dissidents here, to return to China under threat of violence or harm to their families. In terms of specific examples outside the United States, I've mentioned the cartoonist in Cambodia. I could also mention that in 2021 a gentleman called He Wee, who is resident in British Columbia in Canada, he committed suicide, and the Canadian authorities are strongly investigating the links to Operation Fox Hunt. They believed he was pressured into that suicide by...
Mr. Doran, let me redirect your attention to the United States. And if you could tell us what the United States is doing about Operation Fox Hunt?
So the United States government, along with many other Western governments, take Operation Fox Hunt as a very serious threat to national security. The DOJ and the FBI have something called the Transnational Repression Program within their counterintelligence remit. And that specifically is to protect the rights of Chinese citizens, resident in China or U.S. passport holders. U.S. citizens who are naturalized from China, to protect them from the kind of activities that I've described by the Chinese police and intelligence agencies.
Mr. Doran, did you say transnational repression or suppression?
Repression.
Are you familiar with what the DOJ has done in response to Operation Fox Hunt?
Yes. I've read various complaints that have been published by the DOJ relating to Operation Fox Hunt activities in the US.
Where in the US?
In New York, but also in California.
Sitting here today, do you recall which actions the DOJ has brought in either the Eastern District of New York or in California?
I know that the DOJ has indicted a number of Chinese intelligence officers and also US citizens who've been involved in acting as undeclared agents for the Chinese government in terms of seeking the extradition to China of dissident resident in the United States.
Are there Fox Hunt activities outside of the United States in countries such as Canada?
Yes, there are. As I mentioned earlier, there's an example.
I'm going to just... give me 1 second. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that when you talk about Canada, your scope sort of is a little bit defined. Could you just tell the jury if there was a matter where the individuals were intimidated through state and non-state proxies?
Mr. Finkel said, asked and answered.
Yes.
The court said, sustained.
How about in Thailand?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, objection, scope, relevance.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Doran, is there a particular profile that you are familiar with as an expert for Operation Fox Hunt target?
Yes. In my work and my experience of dealing with targets of Operation Fox Hunt, there is a common theme which they all share. And that is generally they have undertaken activity or advocated for something which is one of the Chinese Communist Party's red lines, as we discussed before. And that would be things like pro-democracy, pro-human rights, Hong Kong freedoms, for example.
How about religious freedom?
Religious freedom, certainly.
And criticism of President Xi?
That's probably one of the most sensitive matters. President Xi has built his political reputation in China as being an anti-corruption president. But in fact, a lot of the dissidents have pointed out his corruption.
Mr. Doran, have you ever heard of a person named Miles Guo?
Yes.
Could I show you, please, what is DX60690? Do you recognize the person in this photograph?
I do recognize that person.
Who is that?
That's Miles Guo.
Ms. Shrofa said, we move 60,690 into evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Defendant's Exhibit 60690 received in evidence. By Ms. Shrofa.
Mr. Doran, have you ever seen Mr. Miles Guo in person before today?
Not before today.
And based on your expert opinion, Mr. Doran, does Miles Guo fit the profile of an Operation Fox Hunt target?
In my professional opinion, Mr. Guo is public enemy number 1 in China. He would be right at the top of the target list for Operation Fox Hunt.
And why would that be?
He has exposed corruption at the highest levels in China, which is extremely embarrassing for President Xi and his close circle. He's also advocated for democracy and freedom in China, which is intolerable to the Chinese Communist Party. And he has a social media following, which gives him a prominent voice and platform to advocate those views. So taken together, that makes him probably public enemy number 1 in China.
Before you were retained as an expert in this matter, had you heard of Miles Guo?
Yes, I had.
And was it your impression that he was an outspoken critique of the CCP?
Yes.
Were you aware if the PRC had in fact filed an Interpol red notice against Mr. Guo?
I was aware that a red notice had been filed.
Do you know on what date that red notice had been filed?
If I recall correctly, it was the 19th of April, 2017.
Are you aware of Mr. Guo having done a Voice of America interview?
Yes.
Did you watch that interview?
Not at the time, but I've watched it subsequently.
And what date was that interview done?
That was also the 19th of April, 2017.
May I please have the stip brought up, please, and may I ask for it, please? If we can go to paragraph 5. Could you read for me what paragraph 5 is?
To carry out some of the objectives of Fox Hunt. In 2017, the PRC government tasked a specially designated group of operatives, the group, with discrediting and harassing individuals, including Mr. Guo, by using interactive computer services and electronic communication systems. The group is based out of the Beijing Municipal Public Security Bureau at a facility in Beijing's Dongqing's district. The group was previously referred to as the Cyber Investigation Team, and was later referred to as the 912 Special Project Working Group. The group's tactics aimed at Mr. Guo included using anonymized social media accounts operated by the group and by pressuring U.S. social media companies to remove Mr. Guo and U.S.-based associates of Mr. Guo from social media platforms. These efforts were part of the PRC government's broader effort to prevent, disrupt, and harass Mr. Guo's use of social media and other online platforms to disseminate and discuss disfavored content. In or about December 2018, officers of the group were directed to post 3 videos or posts daily with YouTube and Facebook accounts, with one of the posts required to be anti-Mr. Guo. On February 3, 2020, a PRC government official issued a tasking requirement that every member of the group shall write an original article with content related to targeting Mr. Guo, the COVID pandemic or Hong Kong. The FBI investigated the group's activities, including its activities aimed at Mr. Guo, and the U.S. government has charged many of the group's members with violations of U.S. law.
Mr. Doran, let me show you what is marked as Defense Exhibit number 7006. Could you tell me, please, what is the date of this complaint?
The date is the 18th of April, 2017.
Now going back to Defense Step 1. Could I have you look at paragraph number 2, which reads, in 2017, a U.S. law enforcement agency assessed that Miles Guo was the highest priority of China's repatriation efforts. Mr. Doran, were you aware of this fact in 2017?
No, I wasn't.
Mr. Doran, is there a list of targets maintained by the CCP?
Yes, there is.
And may I just ask, Mr. Salazar, if you could keep the stip on the left side and bring up GXC63. Mr. Doran, have you seen GX63T before?
Yes, I believe so.
That's the document to your right. Have you seen it before?
No, the one on the right. No, I haven't seen it before.
Could I go to page 6 if you could highlight the right section for him, Mr. Salazar? Could you read that for the jury, please?
This includes the $4 billion that the Communist Party has spent to halt. Hackers are trying to stop the ceremony of the declaration of our founding of the new federal state of China tomorrow, June 3rd at 7 p.m. New York time. And the day after, that is, before 12 p.m. on June the 4th.
What is June 4th in the history of the People's Republic of China?
It's the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Let me just ask you a few questions about the means and methods of Operation Fox Hunt and its hacking of its targets. I think I need 63T back, and if I could go to page 6. Would you agree with the statement that you just read?
Yes.
You can take that down and just have the stip back up. Could you describe for the jury, please? What is online propaganda and disinformation used by the CCP?
In simple terms, this is fake news, false news. This information means the reader is deceived into believing something which isn't true or confused into thinking we don't know what fact and fiction is here. This is a tactic commonly used by the Chinese Communist Party.
If I could have you look at this stip and go to paragraph 4 and 5. If you could just read that for the jury?
In 2018, a U.S. law enforcement agency received information that the PRC government had established a special investigative group in China to manage China's investigation of actions against Mr. Guo.
Were you aware of this fact in 2018?
No.
And keep reading, please, to paragraph 5.
To carry out some of the objectives of Fox Hunt in 2017, the PRC government tasked a specially designated group of operatives, the group, with discrediting and harassing individuals including Mr. Guo by using interactive computer services and electronic communication systems.
We can stop there. Now, Mr. Doran, you also testified as part of Operation Fox Hunt's means and methods. The CCP does in fact seize a target's assets, correct?
Correct.
And could you please read paragraph 8 of the stipulation that is before you?
On October 23, 2018, a court in Hong Kong entered an order seizing and restraining Mr. Guo's assets in Hong Kong and elsewhere under the court's jurisdiction.
Now, You also testified about the means and methods Fox Hunt uses by pressuring host countries to return the target to the PRC. You remember that?
Yes.
If you could read paragraph 7 of the STIP.
Between May 2017 and January 2018, at least for individuals, including George Higginbotham, Elliot Broidy, Nick Lum Davis and Prakasrel Michel, never disclosed that they were actually acting on behalf of foreign actors, including the PRC government, to lobby officials in the Trump administration in an effort to cause Mr. Guo's extradition to China. Higginbotham, Broidy, Davis, and Michel were each convicted of violating U.S. law regarding their lobbying efforts. The efforts of these individuals were not successful and Mr. Guo was never extradited at the request of the PRC government. Instead, and since approximately 2015, Mr. Guo has been able to reside in the United States with his family.
Mr. Doran, you also testified to the physical intimidation as the method and means used by Operation Fox Hunt, correct?
Correct.
And if you could look at paragraph 6 and tell the jury what it says, please. The stipulation between the United States and Mr. Guo?
Since Mr. Guo fled the PRC government has sought his return for prosecution in the PRC and has employed numerous methods to effect Mr. Guo's capture or arrest. In May 2017, the PRC government sent for undeclared agents from the PRC's Ministry of State Security, MSS, to the United States to attempt to cause Mr. Guo's coerced repatriation to the PRC as part of the Fox Hunt initiative. The U.S. government disrupted the PRC government's efforts to forcefully repatriate Mr. Guo, and Mr. Guo continued to reside in the United States.
You can take that down. Thank you, Mr. Doran. Have you worked with other people or individuals who have been targeted by Operation Fox Hunt?
The court said, Ms. Schroff, I need for you to speak into the microphone.
Do you know why your business has been retained by them?
Mr. Finkel said, calls for speculation, personal knowledge.
What is your understanding of why your clients retain you?
Because of my professional expertise and my experience in China.
The court said, Ms. Schroff, I need you to get closer to the microphone.
And what is it that your clients seek from you in terms of advice?
They seek advice on how to reduce the risk to themselves and their families and to their businesses posed by hostile actions by the PRC. They also ask me to deliver training to them on how to do that.
And do you advise your clients on how to combat the tactics of Operation Fox Hunt?
Yes, I do.
What do you advise them to do?
Well, each individual case is different. But I would say broadly I advise them on how to dissipate their risk. Would you like me to give you some examples?
Sure.
So one thing to do would be to hold multiple cellular phones so that if one is being surveilled or hacked, then there are others which may not be. Another tactic would be to use various online email addresses and personalities online in order to dissipate risk. And very importantly, financial assets to be held across different banks or different asset categories so that if one is seized or frozen, then the subject would have access to other resources that aren't frozen at that time.
Do you also advise them to diversify their identity online?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell the jury what exactly that means?
So I'll put this into context. I think many people would know that Chinese people often have two versions of their name. They have an English version and a Chinese version. And that's a good start. But that's not to do with this case in particular, that's just a cultural issue. But what I would advise them to do is to use those kinds of variants on their name so they have 4, 5, 6, 7 different email addresses or 8 different email accounts that they're associated with. But in some slightly different way so that if one email account is compromised or hacked, that they still have UN-compromised accounts to work with.
And have you heard of a phrase called harden your physical location?
Yes, that's a standard risk mitigation phrase in terms of physical security.
What does that mean?
So it means if a person is a potential or likely target for kidnapping, for example, they may wish to invest in hardening their residence. And by that I mean things like introducing CCTV cameras, access control, special security lighting, alarm systems. They may even choose to employ bodyguards as well.
Let me show you what is DX60623. Have you seen this document before?
No, I haven't.
Would you expect the target of Operation Fox Hunt to have installed a surveillance system?
Absolutely.
You can take that down. Mr. Doran, would it be best practices for Miles Gua to have several burner phones?
In my professional view, it would be good security risk management practice for Mr. Gua to have multiple burner phones.
How about several bank accounts?
Similarly, I think it would be good security practice.
Would it also be good security practice for him to hire ex-NYPD or law enforcement for physical safety?
Yes, if that's within his financial resources.
And how about for him to have surveillance installed at his offices and home?
If by surveillance you mean CCTV cameras, yes, I would recommend that.
Mr. Doran, you spent about an hour and a half testifying here today. Have any of your answers been motivated by the amount of money you've been paid?
Absolutely not.
Have your answers been motivated by how many times you met me?
No.
How many times did you meet me?
I met you in person in London on the 25th and 26th of April. We subsequently had a Zoom call in mid-May. And then I met you here in New York last week, 25th and 26th of June.
Did I meet you yesterday?
Yes, I met you yesterday.
Did we talk about the case?
No.
Did you meet me the day before?
I don't think so, no.
Ms. Strofa said, I have nothing further, Your Honor.
The court said, cross-examination.
Cross-examination. By Mr. Finkel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ryan Finkel. I'm an assistant United States attorney. Did you know that?
Yes, I do.
And my job along with my colleagues is to enforce violations of United States law. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did you know that to perform this you have to take an oath to the Constitution of the United States?
Yes, I did know that.
And this trial is being conducted in the United States, of course, right?
Yes.
And it's subject to U.S. law, right?
Yes.
And it's being presided over by a United States District Judge, Judge Torres, right?
Ms. Strofa said, Objection, Your Honor. I don't know if Mr. Doran knows.
The court said, am I presiding over the case?
The witness said, yes.
We can put up DX Stip 1, please, Ms. Loftus. You testified about this stipulation during your direct examination, correct, sir?
Yes.
I want to draw your attention to a few points. First, could we go to the last page, Ms. Loftus? Do you see the signatures at the bottom?
Yes, I do.
This is a stipulation between the government, the United States government, and Mr. Gua's attorneys, right?
I understand that to be, yes.
The parties agree. There's no dispute about what's in this stipulation, right?
I can't speak for you. I don't know.
Let's go to the first page. It is hereby stipulated and agreed by the United States of America and Miles Gua, the defendant, through their attorneys of record that, and it lists several parties. So the parties agree?
Yes.
Go back to the last page, please, Ms. Loftus. In fact, that signature where below it says Damian Williams, United States Attorney, Southern District of New York by, and there are 4 names. You see that?
Yes.
That line with the signature.
Yes.
You know that's my signature?
I didn't know that was your signature, but I take your word that's your signature.
I signed this document.
Ms. Strofa said, Objection, is Mr. Finkel testifying?
The court said, don't testify, Mr. Finkel.
I signed this document, correct?
Ms. Strofa said, Objection.
The court said, Mr. Finkel, he could not possibly know your signature. If you want to ask whether your name falls below what appears to be a signature, you may do that.
My name and my colleague's name falls below the signature. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
We can zoom out of that and go to paragraph 5. And you read parts of paragraph 5, I think, correct? Sir?
Yes.
And the last sentence? Can you read that where it says the FBI?
The FBI investigated the group's activities, including its activities aimed at Mr. Guo, and the U.S. government has charged many of the group's members with violation of U.S. law.
That's what the FBI does. It investigates violations of U.S. law, charge people who violate it, correct?
Correct.
If we can look at paragraph 6, please, Ms. Loftus. Can you read the paragraph beginning? Sorry, the sentence beginning the U.S. government sort of at the bottom.
The U.S. government disrupted the PRC's government efforts to forcefully repatriate Mr. Guo, and Mr. Guo continue to reside in the United States.
The United States government stopped what the PRC was doing to Mr. Guo. That's what it says, right?
Yes.
And if we can look at the next paragraph, please, Ms. Loftus, paragraph 7. And this is a paragraph, sir. About George Higginbotham, Elliot Broidy, Nick Lund Davis, and Prakazrel Michel as he's known. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you learn about this case generally speaking?
In which time frame?
In your work as a security professional who follows fox hunt-related issues and CCP-related issues. Did you follow this particular case, this investigation?
To a certain extent.
So you didn't follow it?
To a certain extent I did.
Does this paragraph in your view accurately reflect what the case was about?
Yes.
It summarizes it pretty well?
For me it does.
This is sufficient information about this case?
Ms. Strofa said, "Objection. It's the same question 5 different ways."
Mr. Finkel said, "I'll move on. Can you read where it says Higginbotham, Broidy Davis, and Michel? It's sort of in the middle."
Higginbotham, Broidy Davis and Michel were each convicted of violating U.S. law regarding their lobbying efforts.
They were charged and convicted for violating U.S. law, right?
Yes.
And their efforts were not successful?
They weren't successful.
The court said, "What do you understand that they were trying to do?"
The witness said, "My understanding was that they were trying to use their influence with the Trump administration to pressure or coerce or persuade the U.S. government to repatriate Mr. Guo back to China."
The court said, "What do you mean by repatriate?"
The witness said, "Put him on a plane and put him back to China."
And it didn't happen, right?
It didn't happen.
We can take that down, Ms. Loftus. And, Mr. Doran, how long did you live in China for?
I live in China for 4 years.
During those 4 years, you testified about this on direct. You were surveilled. Is that correct?
Yes.
You were watched physically and also through electronic surveillance?
Yes.
You said that people broke into your apartment. Is that right?
There were covert entry into my apartment.
Fair to say you were harassed by the CCP?
I was targeted by them.
You were targeted by the CCP?
Yes.
Have you ever raised money by making false promises online?
No.
You haven't committed fraud?
No.
Being targeted by the CCP doesn't give you license to do those things, does it?
No.
You're familiar with the South China Sea?
Yes, I am.
Just can you describe to the jury the geographic location of the South China Sea?
So the South China Sea is in the Western Pacific region. It's that part of the ocean which borders on southern China and goes down to Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and it's a contested area.
And fair to say tensions are rising in that area between the PRC and some neighboring countries?
Yes.
And one of those neighboring countries would be Taiwan, right?
Taiwan certainly, yeah.
What is Taiwan also known as?
Republic of China.
Why is it called the Republic of China?
In 1949, at the conclusion of the Chinese Civil War, the non-communist forces evacuated to China. But they retained their claim to be the government of the whole of China, so they retained the name Republic of China.
And that was Chiang Kai-shek, right?
That's correct.
He was the leader of democracy in China, and they were defeated by the CCP and escaped to Taiwan.
Yes.
Ms. Strofa said, "Is Mr. Finkel testifying about the history of China?"
The court said, "He's cross-examining and asking leading questions. Go ahead."
By Mr. Finkel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Doran, you are of course familiar with the fact that the United States government provides military support to the government of Taiwan, right?
I am aware of that.
In fact, it's under the provisions of the Taiwan Relations Act, right?
Yes.
And some of the hardware that the American government provides to the Taiwanese includes things like missiles. Correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Battle tanks, correct?
Yes.
F-16s, correct?
I'm not sure which combat aircraft is supplied, but I imagine F-16s.
Combat aircraft though, right?
Yes.
HIMARS rockets, correct?
Yes.
Drones, correct?
Yes.
And these are equipment for the Taiwanese to defend themselves against the CCP, correct?
Yes.
How many Lamborghinis has the United States government sent to Taiwan?
Ms. Strofa said, "If you know."
I don't know.
What about Bugattis? How many Bugattis has the United States government sent to Taiwan?
I don't know.
Can we pull up GXE9 at page 140, please? Zoom in on that bottom, please. This is Miles Guo in a Lamborghini. Right, sir?
Yes.
To your knowledge, has the United States government sent any Lamborghinis to Taiwan?
I have no idea.
A Lamborghini wouldn't do pretty good against a Chinese tank, would it?
Ms. Strofa said, "Objection. How would he know?"
In your expert opinion?
The court said, "If you happen to know about the capabilities of Lamborghinis."
What I would say is that of course a Lamborghini would be no challenge to a Chinese tank. But there may be other reasons that US government might choose to send Lamborghinis to Taiwan that I'm not aware of.
Who would be? We can take that down. You also talked about some equipment and materials that your clients. You recommend your clients obtain. Is that correct?
Yes.
Surveillance cameras, for example, right?
Yes.
Bodyguards, for example?
Yes.
Do you recommend that your clients sleep on a $35,000 mattress?
I don't have any professional interest on my client's sleeping arrangements.
Sleeping on a $35,000 mattress has nothing to do with protecting yourself from CCP targeting, right?
No.
No, it doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
And also a $90,000 CLED TV. Do you recommend that your clients purchase that to protect themselves from the CCP?
Well, I would recommend that clients have access to the best media they have at their disposal.
So a $400 Vizio television that you buy at Best Buy, that's not good enough.
Ms. Strofa said, "Objection. He lives in the UK and I don't think he knows Best Buy."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer if you know."
What I would say is my recommendations to my clients is always to purchase the best equipment that they can afford.
Where do you buy your electronics? Do you have Amazon?
Yes.
Amazon tells TVs, right?
Yes.
There's a difference between a $90,000 CLED TV and a $400 Vizio TV, right?
That's correct.
Is your expert testimony that a $90,000 TV is necessary to protect oneself against the CCP?
No, that's not my expert testimony. But what I would say is, I advise my client to avail themselves of the best equipment that they can afford for reliability reasons.
If we can put up 1B124F, please. You haven't seen this picture before?
Yes.
You see the three young women are circled in red?
Yes.
It's like they're targets, right?
Ms. Strofa said, "Objection. What does he mean because they're circled?"
The court said, sustained.
Circling someone identifies them as a target, correct?
No.
No.
I would disagree. I think circling them can be a means of drawing my attention to them. It doesn't mean that they're target of anything.
But if these women were harassed, that would be targeting, right?
Ms. Strofa said, objection, assumes facts not in evidence.
The court said, he's asking an expert a hypothetical question which is acceptable. You may answer.
Could you repeat the question?
Certainly. You can note down. You've been harassed. You just testified to that a moment ago, right?
Yes.
And the manner in which you were harassed was how by the CCP?
Yes. As I said, I was surveilled. My telephone communications were not private. My email was not private.
People were watching you.
Yes.
That's harassment, right?
It's harassment. Certainly it's harassment. I would characterize it as surveillance. It's the kind of activities that foreign intelligence agencies conduct.
To just stand outside of people's homes and watch them.
In my case, they weren't that crude. They were a bit more sophisticated than that. But certainly that could happen, yeah.
One of the surveillance techniques that CCP operatives use is to film people, right?
Yes, that's true.
So standing outside someone's home and filming them, whether surreptitiously or overtly, is a CCP tactic. Right?
Yes.
Especially if you do it at their place of work too and their home, right?
Yes.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, may Mr. Finkel not ask a compound question?
The court said, so break it down.
I move on. Sir, is this sensationalizing? Please tell me if it is. That president, she is determined to ensure party control over the economy in China?
That's a matter of fact, not sensationalized.
That's a fair statement.
Yes.
And you would agree, sir, that the CCP has factions within it, right?
Yes.
And there's infighting within the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Yes.
In fact, somewhat recently, Hu Jintao, you know who he is, right?
Yes.
Who is Hu Jintao?
He's the former president of China.
I think you know what I'm referring to probably. What happened with Hu Jintao recently?
If I assume I'm talking about the same incident you're talking about, it was at the plenum session of the Chinese Communist Party. And he was prevented from speaking and kind of forcefully hustled out of the chamber.
Right. And Hu Jintao, it's understood, you tell me, represented a different faction within the CCP than President Xi, correct?
Yes.
And these factions were fighting, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily physically fighting, but they were.
Ms. Strofa said, objection. Is there a question?
Mr. Finkel said, I'm trying to get there.
The court said, we're waiting for the question.
Not necessarily physical fighting, correct?
Power struggles.
Right. There was a power struggle within the CCP, correct?
Yes.
And President Xi's faction, fair to say, prevailed, right?
Yes.
And to demonstrate his authority and control over the CCP, President Xi had President Hu Jintao ejected from that meeting you mentioned, correct?
Ms. Strofa said, I believe this has been asked and answered.
The court said, you may answer.
I would say that was the reason he was ejected from the plenum session.
And so President Xi's in control of the Chinese economy. You're aware, sir, that Miles Guo earned a lot of money when he was in China, right?
Could you repeat that?
You're aware, sir, that Miles Guo earned a lot of money when he was in China, right?
I'm aware he was a successful entrepreneur.
Right. He owned a hotel, right?
Yes.
Said to have millions of dollars, right?
I'm not very expert on his business dealings, but that's what I understand.
You're not testifying about his business dealings. And you know, sir, that Miles Guo had a benefactor in the Chinese Communist Party, right, Ma Jian?
Yes.
Who's Ma Jian?
So Ma Jian, I believe, was a former vice minister.
For the MSS, right?
Yes.
And that's as you said it, the CIA for the Chinese Communist Party?
That's correct.
That was Miles Guo's benefactor.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection, that's not what he testified to. He simply identified who the person was."
The court said, "You may answer."
I stated that the MSS is the Chinese equivalent of the Central Intelligence Agency.
And you understand that Miles Guo lent money to Ma Jian's sister, right?
I don't know that.
And then Guo then bought back from Ma Jian's sister, sorry. Ma Jian's sister then spent that money to buy properties. You know that, right?
I don't know that.
Then Guo bought back those properties from Ma Jian's sister. Did you know that?
I don't know that.
And this was designed to Ma Jian can make a profit?
Ms. Shrofa said, "He said he doesn't know that, so how would he talk about what it's designed for?"
The court said, "Sustained."
Exploring this expert's knowledge. In exchange, you know, sir. That Ma Jian helped Miles Guo with businesses, correct?
I didn't know that.
To be a billionaire in China requires some connections or help from the CCP, right?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection."
The court said, "You may answer if you know."
I think in many countries there is an intersection between the very rich and the very powerful.
Including in China?
Including in China, but not only in China.
You're here to testify about China?
Millimeter HM.
The court said, "Is that a yes?"
Yes.
And do you know that Miles Guo has been a long-time affiliate of the MSS, and that he had a handling name known as a Wunan Sick?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection, compound."
I didn't know that.
You do know that Ma Jian ran into trouble with President Xi's faction of the CCP, right?
I know that there was a dispute. I'm not aware of what the nature of the dispute was.
There was a dispute. Ma Jian was arrested, right?
Yes.
And Miles Guo then fled, went to Hong Kong, right?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection."
The court said, "Overruled."
Yes.
And after being in Hong Kong, Miles Guo came to the United States? That was in 2015, right?
Yes.
And in 2015, he kept a low profile, wasn't doing broadcasts, correct?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection."
The court said, "Overruled."
Ms. Shrofa said, "It's not part of his expert knowledge."
The court said, "If he knows, he can answer."
I was personally not aware of Mr. Guo and his activities in 2015.
And Mr. Guo kept a low profile in 2016 too, correct?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Objection." He said he doesn't know.
Same answer, I don't know.
You know, in 2017.
Yes.
Then Mr. Guo cause.
Yes.
You testified about that?
Yes.
He had that interview with Voice of America.
Well, that's when he came to my attention.
That was in 2017, right?
Yes.
That 2017 Voice of America interview, you watched it, right?
Yes.
He was talking about the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Yes.
And he was saying that he was promoting freedom in China, right?
Yes.
He didn't launch a business in that interview. It was an interview about politics, right?
Yes.
Then in November 2018, Miles Guo launched the Rule of Law Foundation, right?
Yes.
And in that launch he asked for money, right? Donations, right?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Is he asking the question of Mr. Doran knows this?"
The court said, "He's asking that question. He makes a statement and it goes, comma, right question mark. You can answer."
I'm aware that he solicited donation for the foundation.
For the Rule of Law Foundation in November of 2018, right?
Yes.
Ken, if we pull up DX Step 1, let's go to paragraph 8. Can you read that please, Mr. Doran?
On October 23, 2018, a court in Hong Kong entered an order seizing and restraining Mr. Guo's assets in Hong Kong and elsewhere under the court's jurisdiction.
So October 23, 2018, Miles Guo's assets in Hong Kong were seized by the Chinese government, right?
Yes.
We can put up GXW 1005, please. This is the launch. This is a screenshot. But this is the launch of the Rule of Law Foundation, right?
Yes.
On November 20th, 2018, correct?
Yes.
About a month after the Hong Kong court seized Mr. Guo's assets, he started raising money through the Rule of Law Foundation, right?
Yes.
And then after the Rule of Law Foundation he launched GTV, right?
Ms. Strofa said, objection.
The court said, overruled. If he knows he may answer.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And he asked for money for GTV, right?
Yes.
You don't know what he did with that money, do you?
Ms. Strofa said, objection.
The court said, you may answer if you know.
I have no personal knowledge of that.
Then he set up the Himalaya Farm Alliance?
I understand that, yes.
And he set up the farm loan program to raise more money, right?
Yes.
Then he set up G Club, right?
Yes.
To raise more money, right?
Yes.
And then the Himalaya Exchange H coin, right?
Yes.
Also for money, right?
Yes.
So all after October 2018, when the Chinese government seized his money, right?
I'm not sure you can establish cause and effect there.
It all happened after October 2018?
Ms. Strofa said, actually, Mr. Finkel is wrong. It's not the Chinese government. It's the Hong Kong government.
The court said, you cannot testify.
Mr. Finkel said, I'll withdraw it and back up. Mr. Doran, didn't you testify that essentially the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government one and the same? In fact, you testified. Mr. Finkel said, can Mr. Finkel, 1, slow down?
The court said, slow down, Mr. Finkel.
Did you testify, Mr. Doran? Do you remember Ms. Schroff asked you questions?
Yes.
That was today, right?
Yes.
Do you remember when she asked you whether the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government, the CCP, were one and the same, and you said yes?
Yes.
'Cause they are, right?
Yes.
Ms. Strofa said, in what time frame? Never mind.
Mr. Finkel said, can I finish?
Ms. Strofa said, objection to the question. It's vague.
The court said, overruled. You may continue.
In all those investment opportunities that I just went through, all of those were after October 2018, correct?
Yes.
Now, you were asked to, am I correct, sir? That you were asked to review to testify about the Voice of America interview today?
Yes.
You weren't provided with other statements Miles Guo made about his investment opportunities, were you?
No.
Mr. Finkel said, if we could pull up 6151, please, Ms. Loftus.
Media played.
Mr. Doran, you haven't seen that video before, have you?
No.
There were dates on those videos. Those dates were all after October 2018, right?
Yes.
If we could pull up Z9 at page 16, please, Ms. Loftus. Can you read underneath where it says 459?
This is completely a business operation. Do not link the G-series, under any circumstances, to the NFSC. That is all bullshit.
That's Miles Guo's statement.
Ms. Strofa said, objection. How would he know?
Do you know?
I don't know.
Zoom out of that, Ms. Loftus, and scroll up. That's Miles Guo right there, right?
Yes.
Do you know, sir, that in 2017, Miles Guo had conversations with government officials in China while he was in the United States?
I didn't know that.
Do you know he told them?
Ms. Shrofa said, if he didn't know there was a conversation, how could he know what he told them? Objection.
The court said, sustained.
Do you know if he told them?
Ms. Shrofa said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
Part of the way, sir, that the Chinese Communist Party maintains influence in the country of China and elsewhere is through symbols, right?
Symbols, yes.
Symbols are important, right?
Yes.
For example, the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Republic of China has a flag, right?
Yes.
What does that flag look like?
So it's a red flag with a prominent yellow star in the top left-hand corner, which is surrounded by a constellation of smaller yellow stars.
Do you know what those stars symbolize?
Those stars symbolize the People's Republic of China in my knowledge.
You don't know that symbolize the unity between the four social classes of China and the government at the top. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
And you're also familiar, sir, with the Nanchang Uprising?
Nanjing Uprising.
Was that the beginning of the Civil War in China?
That's an interesting historical question, and I can answer it if you allow me.
What year was that?
1937.
And that was a battle, a fight between the Chinese Communist Party forces and Chiang Kai-shek's forces. Is that right?
No, it was a battle between Chinese forces and occupying Japanese forces.
And that's where the People's Liberation Army sort of got its start. Is that right?
No.
When did the People's Liberation Army get its start?
It started before then with the Communist Party began its uprising in China in the late 20s. So the armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party's been in existence almost as long as the CCP was, so from 1923 onwards.
So the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, is used by the CCP to enact its policy goals. It's fair to say?
The People's Liberation Army is the military of China is a tool that can be used by the Chinese government to advance its national security objectives.
And the People's Liberation Army, it wasn't established prior to the Chinese Communist Party's gaining power?
Ms. Shrofa said, asked and answered.
So,
The court said, you may answer.
So the PLA as we know it today was constituted when the Chinese Communists won the Civil War.
And you testified that PLA is ultimately the control of the PLA is ultimately President Xi. He's in charge of it, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the symbols of the People's Liberation Army of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes.
What does the PLA flag look like?
PLA flag depends on the branch of the military you're talking about. But if it was the PLA ground forces or the army, that would be an N sign which is based on the Chinese flag. It's a star in the left-hand corner, and I believe it has white and green stripes on the bottom.
There's also a PLA flag without the stripes, right?
Yes. There's a Navy flag and an Air Force flag.
If you can put up SH-146, Ms. Loftus, can we zoom in on the left one? And, sir, the symbol on the left. That's the star that's taken from the Chinese Communist Party's flag, right?
Yes.
And the slash, the two slashes and the line, those are insignias of the PLA, right?
Yes.
And the insignia on the right, that's also an insignia of the PLA, right?
Yes.
Do you know this box was found in Miles Guo's desk?
I didn't know that.
If we can look at 151, please, Ms. Loftus. Zoom in on that. These are the same symbols, just physical form. Correct?
Yes.
Ms. Loftus, can you put up 146 on the left side and DX6688 on the right? You talked about this gentleman on your right during your direct testimony, right?
Yes.
Can you remind the members of the jury who is?
Lieutenant General Bai Yi.
Ms. Loftus, Can you zoom in on the box on the left? And can you zoom in on the logo on the general's hat? Appears to be the same logo, right?
Yes.
PLA logo, right?
Yes.
Continued on next page.
Mr. Finkel said, take that down. You reviewed, sir, a document of Miles with statements that was GXC63T, right?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, could we pull that up, please, Ms. Loftus?
Ms. Strofa said, Mr. Doran, could I just remind you to keep your voice up?
The witness said, yes.
Ms. Strofa said, thank you.
By Mr. Finkel.
Do you remember being asked some questions about this document on direct?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, we can go to page 27. And can you zoom in on 40:24, please? And these were statements that you read of Miles Gua, this document, right?
Only when you showed them to me.
Didn't Ms. Schroff show you this document before?
I don't think so, no.
You forgot?
I can't recall whether I've seen this document or not.
Mr. Finkel said, okay. Zoom out. Could we go to the first page, please? Take a look at it. Let me know if that refreshes your recollections about being asked questions by Ms. Schroff about this document.
You asked me questions about this document.
Do you remember Ms. Schroff asking you questions about this document, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And did you review this document in advance of your testimony?
Yes, I think it was part of the package of documents I was sent.
Right. This is one of the packages. This is one of the documents that defense counsel sent you?
Yeah.
Ms. Strofa said, objection.
The court said you may answer.
It's a document that I've seen, but I've seen a lot of documents. And I'm struggling to remember this particular one.
Okay. See at the top it says Speaker, Wagoigwa?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, if we can please go to page 27. And zoom in on 40:24. Can you read that?
In this GTV investment, I had a separate conversation with each investor. This is a serious and solemn commitment and responsibility of Wenguigwa to you to be responsible for this investment forever. This is a legally valid commitment and attitude.
Miles Gua's statement, according to this document, right?
I understand it to be, yes.
Mr. Finkel said, can we go to page 30, please? And can you zoom in on 45:02? This starts, Mr. Doran. Our whistleblower movement does not have any cult of the individual. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Can you read the rest?
There can be no cult of the individual, let alone mythologize any individual. Without the whistleblower movement's fellow fighters, Wenguigwa is nothing. Anyone who is apart from whistleblower movement will be nothing either.
There can be no cult of the individual, right? That's what it says.
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, Ms. Loftus, if you could please play what's in evidence as C281V.
Media played.
Mr. Finkel said, stop right there, please. Mr. Doran, did you know that video cost $1 million?
I did not know that.
Do you know that Miles Gua is in every frame of that video?
I saw that, yes.
Fair to say that President Xi is trying to promote a cult personality within China, correct?
Yes.
That's common among dictators, right?
Yes.
Happens in North Korea, for example?
Yes.
And one of the ways to promote that cult of personality in China is that if the Chinese people express views contrary to President Xi, they're retaliated against, right?
Yes.
People criticize the leader, they're retaliated against, right?
Yes.
Those are the rules of the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the rules of the Himalaya Farm Alliance?
No.
How about the new federal state of China?
No.
Do you know if you criticize Miles Gua, you're retaliated against?
I didn't know that.
The Himalaya Farm Alliance will retaliate against you?
Ms. Shrofa said, "Is that a question?"
Correct?
The court said, "There's the question."
I have no knowledge of that.
New federal state of China will retaliate against you if you criticize Miles Gua?
I have no knowledge of that.
Mr. Finkel said, "Nothing further."
The court said, "Redirect."
Redirect examination. By Ms. Shrofa.
How are you doing, Mr. Doran?
I'm good. Thank you. You?
Hanging in there. So let me just start with this video that we just watched, okay?
Yes.
And I promise you I will not make you watch it again. Did you read the captions on that video?
Yes.
And if I get it wrong, I am sure Mr. Finkel will pull it right up. But did you read the text that said, "Take down the CCP and then Mongolia"?
Yes.
Is there some specific thing going on with China and Mongolia?
Not that I'm aware of, but maybe the phrase itself was expressed in Mongolian rather than Mandarin. I don't know.
Mr. Finkel said, "Move to strike." Speculation? He said maybe.
The court said, "If you know, you may state it, but don't speculate."
Do you know if Mongolia has a specific culture that is somewhat separate from the rest of China?
Well, Mongolia is an independent country separate from China.
And do you think that it's possible that somebody could make a video to support the culture of Mongolia?
Mr. Finkel said, "Calls for speculation. Is it possible?"
You know what? I'll play the video then and show you the language on the video so I can pinpoint to you what it says.
Okay.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Could we pull up the video?"
Mr. Finkel said, her question was, is it possible someone would do something, not what the language in the video says? I didn't object to the language in the video.
Let's look at the title. What does it say?
It says, "Take down the CCP, Mongolian."
Do you understand what that means?
I understand take down the CCP, but I'm not sure what Mongolian refers to.
Ms. Shrofa said, "Okay, just keep it right there. As a CCP expert, do you know that the CCP is specifically intent on destroying the culture of Mongolia?
Yes, Mongolian culture in China, like other non-Han cultures, like non-mainstream ethnic Chinese cultures, is under immense pressure, so Mongolians, like Tibetans, like Uyghurs, like other national and ethnic minorities, are being forcibly assimilated into a predominantly Han Chinese culture."
And in this video, if we could just try and get that language, do you see where it says repeatedly, "We are the real owners of the pastures"? Did you remember that phrase?
Yes.
Do you see it right there?
Yes.
It doesn't say, "I, Miles Gua, am the real owner of this pasture," correct?
No, it doesn't. It says a we.
And "we" is inclusive, correct?
Yes.
It is not a dictator that would say "we," correct?
Correct.
Ms. Shrofa said, "You can take that down, please." Is it fair to say, Mr. Doran, just using your common sense, that not everybody has the same taste in music?
Mr. Finkel said, "Objection to common sense, but I will stipulate that everyone has different tastes in music."
And because a video is made and you don't agree with that taste, it does not necessarily mean it's a cult video, correct?
Yes, correct.
Mr. Finkel said, "Form."
The court said, "I'll allow the question."
Yes, it's correct.
He calls it a cult video. You didn't call it a cult video, right?
I don't believe it's a cult video.
Mr. Finkel said, "Objection. I didn't call it a cult video."
The court said, "No, he did not even mention that word."
Did you think that that was a video promoting a cult?
No.
Did you think it was a video promoting the separatist culture of Mongolia?
I saw it as a video by a person representing the group advocating for a certain goal.
Did you see where, in the video, it says, "Brothers, stand up and fight"?
Yes.
And did you see in the video where it says, "Take down the CCP"?
Yes.
Did you see anywhere where he stands up and says, "Worship me"?
No.
Did you know if Miles Gua's music was on Apple's, whatever it is, iPhones, wherever they sell the music? I don't do that, but...
Mr. Finkel said, objection to form.
The court said you can answer.
I wasn't aware, but my taste doesn't run to that kind of music.
Mine either. But did you know he topped the charts in Cambodia?
I didn't, but congratulations.
Do you know if what he's wearing in that video are clothing made by G Fashion?
I don't know that.
Did you know if Miles Guo was a promoter of G Fashion?
I don't know that.
Mr. Finkel here asked you many questions about dictatorships, and then he juxtaposed the Himalaya Alliance. Correct?
Yes.
Mr. Finkel said, objection to the form and argumentative. I pose questions.
The court said, sustained.
Do you know anything about the Himalaya Alliance?
Not very much at all.
Do you know if they have committees?
I assume as an organization they have governance.
Do you know if they have more than one committee?
I don't know.
Do you know if they have an audit committee?
I don't know.
Do you know if they have a membership committee?
I don't know.
Do you know if China has an audit committee?
I don't know.
Do you know if the Himalaya Alliance is separate and apart from Miles Guo?
Mr. Finkel said, objection. He testified he doesn't know about the Himalaya Farm Alliance.
The court said, sustained.
Do you know anything about the new federal state of China?
From what I've read in the media.
Right. And when Mr. Finkel asked you about people being exterminated from the new federal state of China if they criticize Mr. Guo, you don't know any such thing, correct?
The court said, he did not use that term.
Do you remember him asking you questions about the new federal state of China?
I do.
Do you remember him asking you what would happen if somebody criticized the new federal state of China?
He did ask me that question.
Do you remember what he intimated was the response?
Mr. Finkel said, objection.
The court said, so it's only about what he states.
Do you know anything about the new federal state of China and how it either accepts or not accepts members?
All I know about the new federal state of China is what it stands for and what it advocates.
And what does it stand for?
It stands for.
Mr. Finkel said, objection. Because he said he didn't.
Ms. Schrofa said, he opened the door.
Mr. Finkel said, it's his lack of personal knowledge. It's what he read.
The court said, it's a question of whether you have knowledge and you can answer from your own knowledge.
The witness said, yes, I can.
The court said, go ahead.
So contacts of mine in China, who I'm in regular contact with, who?
Mr. Finkel said, objection. This is hearsay.
The court said, so don't say what others have said to you.
Okay. My understanding is.
The court said, no, if you have an understanding from someone else, don't express that understanding.
By Ms. Schrofa.
Through your experience and knowledge and your work, do you have an understanding of what the new federal state of China stands for?
Yes.
The court said, if it's just a way of getting around hearsay, the idea, sir, is that you're not to give an answer that depends upon something that someone else told you.
I would answer then in saying that in the course of my work, which generally tracks and follows political events in China. I have been aware of the new federal state of China and what it.
And have you been aware of what it stands for?
Yes.
What does it stand for?
Mr. Finkel said, same objection, Your Honor. Based on.
The court said, if it's not based on hearsay, he may hearsay. Answer.
So my understanding is that it's based on advocacy for freedom and democracy in China.
Mr. Doran, does the MSS engage in protests against its critiques?
Sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Does the MSS engage in peaceful protests against its critiques?
No.
The court said, do you mean critics against its critics?
Against its critics?
Ms. Schrofa said, sorry, Your Honor. I mispronounced the word.
Critics? No, it doesn't.
Now you recall you were shown those many buttons that were found, according to the government, in Mr. Guo's home.
Yes.
Or drawer.
Yes.
Ms. Schrofa said, can we pull all of them back up? Does anybody have those? You remember being asked questions about this?
Yes.
Would you say that if somebody had one of these things, they might be worth money?
Mr. Finkel said, objection.
The court said, so he's not here to testify about the value of objects.
You were asked questions about these objects, correct?
Sorry. Repeat that?
This prosecutor asked you questions about these objects, correct?
Yes, yes.
And then he asked you questions about the flag. And then he showed you that general's insignia on his head with the hat, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is it fair to say, sir, that symbols have, as he asked you, specific meanings, correct?
Yes, they do. But can I just add something to that?
The court said, now, you just answer the question.
The witness said, okay.
Symbols can be co-opted, correct?
Yes.
So you can take a symbol that symbolizes one thing. Co-opt it so that it means something different to a whole new group of people, correct?
That's possible, or it could just be merchandising.
And same thing with words, right? You co-opt a word that is negative in culture to make it positive, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now it is also fair to say that. Ms. Schrofa said, you know what, you can take this thing down. Thank you. It's fair to say that people have falling outs within political parties, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
People have falling outs in personal relationships, correct?
Yes.
And people have fallings out in professional relationships, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you could be a lifelong Democrat and then stop being one when Donald Trump becomes president, correct?
Mr. Finkel said, objection on a few levels, but we'll start with calls for speculation.
The court said, sustained.
Would you want to be a Republican for Donald Trump?
It's one of the times I'm thankful for being British.
Mr. Finkel said, objection.
The court said, okay. He gave us his answer. He's thankful to be British.
Let me pull up for you GX63T, Mr. Doran. You were asked questions about this document, correct?
Yes.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Doran, that I have never sent you any documents?
Yes, that's correct.
And I have not asked you to review this document with me before you testified about it today?
That's correct.
You've never reviewed this document in its entirety, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You don't know anything about how Mr. Miles Guo was employed as a promoter for G Clubs, correct?
I don't know anything about that.
You don't know how he raised money for G Clubs, correct?
I don't know other than what I've read in the media.
And you don't know anything about the cost of a G Club's membership, correct?
No, I don't.
You don't know anything about the benefits of a G Club membership, correct?
No, I don't.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Doran, that Operation Fox Hunt does not target the PLA, correct?
Mr. Finkel said, objection to scope.
Ms. Schrofa said, that's what it's well within. He brought up the PLA.
The court said, you may answer.
No, that's a completely counterintuitive question. The Chinese state doesn't target its own agencies.
And as far as you're concerned, sitting here today, Miles Guo is a target of Fox Hunt, correct?
Absolutely.
You were asked a lot of questions about drones, planes, and things being sent to Taiwan, was it? Taiwan, correct?
Yes, yes.
And then you were asked if a Lamborghini had been sent to Taiwan, correct?
I was asked that question.
Are you an expert in gift-giving between countries?
No, I'm not.
You were asked a series of questions about Mr. Miles Guo's seizure of assets and then his actions in G-Series. You recall that?
Yes.
Do you know how much money Mr. Miles Guo's family has in China today?
I don't.
How about in 2016?
I don't.
2017?
I don't.
2019?
No.
Right after any seizure that happened?
No.
Ms. Schrofa said, could we pull up the stip again? And could we go to the last paragraph, please? After October 23rd of 2018, do you have any idea how much money Miles Guo's brothers had?
No.
How about his family fund?
No.
How about his wife's money?
No.
Ms. Schrofa said, You can take that down. Sitting here today, do you have any idea what the Rule of Law Foundation does?
My understanding of the Rule of Law Foundation, again, is that it's an advocacy body for introducing democracy into China.
Do you know if it distributes money to other people?
I don't know.
Do you know if it supports Ukrainians in need of help?
I don't know.
Do you know if it helps dissidents get political asylum in the United States?
I don't know.
Do you know if it gives charitable money elsewhere?
I don't know.
You don't know anything about the Rule of Law Foundation, right?
No.
Okay, thank you. You were asked questions, were you not? About Elliot Broidy and Higginbotham and how the Department of Justice prosecuted them, correct?
Yes.
Before they were prosecuted, do you know what actions they took against Miles Guo?
Yes.
The court said when you say they, who are you referring?
Ms. Schrofa said, the group, Higginbotham, Broidy, all of two, them. Do you know what actions they took?
I know what was reported in the media.
Other than that, do you know what actions they took?
And also in the US DOJ documents I've read.
And other than that, do you know what other actions they took?
No.
Do you know how close Mr. Guo was to being put on a plane and shipped back to China?
I understand it was very close.
You were asked many questions about this person named, I'm going to mess up the names. So sorry, Ma Jian. Correct?
Who? Sorry?
Ma Jian, the guy who went to prison, according to Mr. Finkel, arrested in China, sent to prison.
Which person are you referring to?
Ma Jing? Ma Jian. Sorry about that.
Ma Jian, yes.
Sorry about that. And you were asked a whole series of questions about that by Mr. Finkel, correct?
Yes.
And you're not an expert in his life, correct?
No, I'm not.
And you're certainly not an expert on Miles Guo's life, correct?
That's correct.
And is it fair to say that it's part of Operation Fox Hunt to bring false criminal charges against Chinese citizens?
That's a very common tactic of Fox Hunt.
Mr. Finkel said, objection.
The court said so that needs to be qualified.
In China.
The court said, based upon Chinese law.
Yes.
That man has never left China, correct?
Yes, is my understanding, yes.
Right. And the charges that were brought against him were under Chinese law, correct?
Yes. To clarify that, I would say China is not governed by the rule of law. It's governed by the rule by law, which means essentially that the law is whatever the government says it is. So charges against somebody can be legal in a technical sense, but they can be completely bogus.
Okay, but this man was charged in China, correct?
Yes.
By the CCP, correct?
Yes.
And the CCP routinely falsely charges its own dissidents in China, correct?
Yes.
Under Chinese law.
Yes.
Ms. Schrofa said, may I have a moment, Your Honor?
The court said go ahead.
Mr. Doran, you were asked many questions, were you not, by Mr. Finkel about a $35,000 mattress, correct?
Yes.
You don't know anything about a mattress, right?
I know nothing about a mattress.
Okay. And you were asked questions about buying equipment, correct?
Yes.
And you testified that you would recommend to your clients to buy the best quality equipment they could afford, correct?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, from a physical security perspective. If you're installing CCTV cameras in your residence or in your place of work, you need the best quality output. Now they have discrete screens and discrete systems, but you may wish to channel that to your TV screens. In which case my recommendation would always be to buy the best quality you can afford.
Mr. Doran, before you were retained on this case, did you have any personal knowledge of Miles Guo?
Only from what I'd read in the media.
And even after you were retained, you don't have any personal knowledge of Mr. Miles Guo, correct?
No, not at all, no.
Ms. Schrofa said, I have nothing further.
The court said recross.
Recross-examination. By Mr. Finkel.
Sir, an N95 mask, you know what that is, right?
Say that again? Sorry?
An N95 mask, you know what that is, right?
It's a piece of protective equipment.
Right. And in March of 2020, those were used to try to protect everyone from COVID, right?
In the United States, maybe. I'm not sure about other countries.
Ms. Schrofa said, "It's way beyond the scope."
Mr. Finkel said, "I'll get to the scope. Give me like 3 questions." So sorry. You are familiar with N95 masks?
I know what it is. But I wouldn't be able to say whether everybody used it because we have multiple masks in the UK.
Right. But you do know that in March of 2020, when COVID first hit in the UK and in the US, it was hard to get personal protective equipment like N95 masks, right?
Ms. Schrofa said, "Objection. Objection to the compound."
The court said, "All right. So I'm just waiting to get to the scope here."
Mr. Finkel said, "I'm going to get there right now."
The court said, "Okay."
Do you know that the Rule of Law Foundation used donor money to send a shipment of N95 masks in March of 2020 to Miles' house?
I did not know that.
The PLA is controlled by what committee?
Central Military Commission.
Central Military Commission. And what's the Politburo?
Politburo is the sort of governing committee of the Chinese Communist Party. So its president, she is the chair, and then there are several members. And they're his sort of closest political allies and advisors.
Okay. So it's a committee, right?
Yeah.
So Chinese Communist Party has committees, right?
Yes.
And you were asked some questions about the symbols and co-opting symbols, right?
Yes.
And if someone were to co-opt a symbol, they would display it and try to rebrand it, correct?
Ms. Schrofa said, "Objection."
The court said, "You may answer."
That could be one purpose, yes.
Right. You sort of put it out there to change its meaning so that people associate that symbol with a new meaning, correct?
That could be true, yes.
Mr. Finkel said, "If we can put up CT58. All right. Please take a look at this. And let me know if you see any symbols of the PLA.
I can't see any symbols of PLA.
The NFSC flag is on the right, correct?
I understand it to be, yes.
And a 7-pointed star in the center, right?
Yes.
For Brother 7, right?
Yes.
And the symbols? The PLA symbols that you looked at on cross and redirect. Those were in Miles' desk in the drawer. Did you know that?
You told me that they were there, yeah.
Mr. Finkel said, "We can take that down." You were asked some questions on redirect about G-Fashion. You don't know anything about G-Fashion, right?
No.
G-Fashion has nothing to do with why you were hired to testify here today, right?
No.
Okay. And you don't know anything about G-Clubs as you testified, right?
I don't.
Right. G-Clubs has nothing to do with why you were hired to testify here today, correct?
Would you like me to clarify why I was hired to testify?
No. I'm just asking a question.
No, I wasn't.
You don't know anything about how the Himalaya Exchange ran, correct?
I don't.
Right. That has nothing to do with why you were hired to testify today, correct?
Correct.
And the farm loan program? You don't know how that worked, right?
No.
That has nothing to do with why you were hired to testify here today, correct?
That's correct.
Right. The business opportunities that Miles promoted have nothing to do with why you were hired here to testify today. Correct?
I was hired to testify as an expert in the Chinese intelligence and police agencies. An Operation Fox Hunt.
Right. That has nothing to do with the business opportunities that Miles promoted, correct?
Correct.
And that flag right there, that one, do you recognize that flag?
The United States flag, yes.
Mr. Finkel said, "Nothing further."
Redirect examination. By Ms. Schrofa.
In all the time that you and I have met and spoken, Mr. Doran, have I ever mentioned G Club?
No.
GDV?
No.
Farm loan?
No.
Himalaya exchange?
No.
Any exchange, for that matter?
No.
The first time any of these phrases were asked of you was?
By Mr. Finkel on cross-examination. Correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now were you provided transcripts of this trial?
No.
And when Mr. Finkel asked you if you knew about some shipment of masks to Mr. Miles was home, you don't know that to be true, correct?
No knowledge of that at all.
So if Mr. Finkel's statement is correct, do you know how many people at that time during COVID lived in that home?
I don't.
Do you know if the masks were distributed after they got to his home?
I don't.
And by the way, did I ever talk to you about any masks or anything having to do with Mr. Gua? With masks and Mr. Gua?
This is the first time I'm having a conversation about masks.
And that's with Mr. Finkel, right?
Yes.
Did I ask you about what was found in his desk, his drawers, or anything like that?
No.
Did you even know he was brother number 7 of 8 children?
No.
And do you have any particular knowledge about the American flag?
I believe it has 50 stars and 13 stripes.
Well, do you know why you were asked about the American flag?
No idea.
Ms. Schrofa said, nothing further.
Mr. Finkel said, nothing further.
The court said, "Thank you, sir. You may step out of the courtroom."
The witness said, "Thank you. Witness excused."